You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into STB Sports Take, Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham. Thank you for being here. Please hit that subscribe button. This podcast is brought to you by Tripio. Tripio is my company, guys. Check it out. The app is live in the App Store, the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store. Super cool stuff. It'll teach you how to, not teach you, that's a bad word to use, but it'll help you travel better. You enter your preferences, how into nightlife, adventure, art history, culture, good eats, whatever you're into. You give it a 1 to 5 rating on each of these things, and it'll give you a customized itinerary. It's super cool, so check it out. Yes, it is the sponsor, actually, because that's how I make money. But anyway, thank you for being here. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor Podcasts. Everywhere you get your podcasts, that's where we are. So please hit the subscribe button, share the podcast. Summer is in full swing, which I love. It's like obviously everyone's favorite season. Not everyone's, but most people's favorite season. Tons of fun, tons of trips, tons of adventures. Love it. Sports, however, definitely take a little bit of a dip during this time. But we've got some good stuff today. It's going to be quick. It's going to be a shorter one than usual. But it is going to be a fun one. So I hope you guys are enjoying your summer. I hope everything's going well. Things I want to talk on today. The first thing we got to touch on is Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson has been accused by 25 or 26. I see like differing reports there, but I believe it's 26 women have accused him now of basically inappropriate sexual contact. All of them are masseuses, and it seemed like it was his MO to hire a new masseuse and then try and, get with them. That's what it seemed. That's what it appears to be. That's what he's being accused of, and being accused of not just trying to get with them, but kind of forcefully doing things that they didn't want. Which, if true, awful, right? But he, criminal charges have all been dropped. Nothing happened there. Nothing went through. And so it's kind of like an innocent until proven guilty. But the problem is it's out there so much, right? Like I know that the law says, and it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. But is it really, right? Like in the public perception, in the eye of the what's that phrase? The public jury, the jury of the public. What is that phrase? You know what I'm trying to get at. But basically, everyone's opinion of him is that he's like kind of a scumbag, maybe. Like there's some huge doubt. There's just big dark rain cloud following him around. Speaking of rain clouds, it rained horrendously last night here. And it was the exact 1-year anniversary from when my basement flooded from a horrible rainstorm. Don't think I had any issues last night, but right as I said that, I realized I need to go check that after this podcast because I checked a bunch. I don't think there was anything, but I wanted to check one more time today. But anyway, I digress. But there's this huge rain cloud just following Deshaun Watson everywhere. And just by the mere fact of like being accused, it's kind of the opposite of innocent until proven guilty. It's kind of like you're guilty until proven innocent. That's really what society has become. We are guilty until proven innocent. Once you're accused of something this dramatic. Now, with this many of them, it does feel like where there's smoke, there's fire. It does feel like something wrong definitely was going on. It's tough to say exactly what happened because none of us were there, and the criminal charges are that whole case is done. It's closed. Now there's a civil suit going on. I'm sure all of these women will get settlements. He's extremely wealthy. He just signed a monstrosity of a contract with the Cleveland Browns. So I'm sure there'll be a settlement there. But the bigger thing is the NFL, runs its personal internal investigation. I think they actually hired it out, but it's like the NFL's investigation deciding, did he break the player code of conduct, right? Does he deserve to be fined? So, certain guys have gotten suspended in the past, 20 plus games, multiple seasons. Josh Gordon for smoking weed, which is, looking back, I personally don't smoke weed, but that's kind of laughable. Weed's like legal in almost every state now. Medicinally, I believe it is legal in every state, and even recreationally in a lot of states. So that's kind of funny to think back on. 25-game suspension there, 25-plus game suspension. There's been players getting 12-game suspensions for basically targeting. 6-game suspension. DeAndre Hopkins got 6 games for PEDs. So some sort of performance-enhancing drug. I've got one here, 5-game suspension for getting free tattoos. Betting on your own team, 17-game suspension. Okay. Deshaun Watson is accused of sexual assault by 25 or 26 women. He got 6 games. That's what Tom Brady got for supposedly deflating footballs. It's kind of crazy. The NFL, 6 games. It's kind of crazy. Again, I know it should be innocent until proven guilty. That's probably why they're saying, hey, you know what? 6 games is enough. They're doing it for reputation. They're not doing it because for any other reason. They're doing it it's a PR move. We have to suspend him something. We have to do something here. This is like completely dominated the offseason news for the NFL. They have to do something. So they're like, we got to give him 6 games because this was an actual court case, and like the civil or the criminal case was ended. It's over. No crimes were committed according to this. There's now a civil suit going on, but that's not over yet. So what do we do here? Like, this is a case of guilty until proven innocent. They're like, well, we don't even actually know if he did it, but it looks like he probably did. And either way, it looks really, really bad for us to not do anything. So yeah, 6 games. Kind of a funny thing. The NFL has so many players with legal problems. So many. Domestic violence, sexual assaults. There was the Ben Roethlisberger thing. Getting accused of very similar things, even maybe a little bit worse, but by fewer people. There's just so much, so many off the field issues with the NFL, far more than any other sport, by far. Guns and clubs and beating up on your girlfriend and having a bunch of guns in your car and like all sorts of drug issues and things like that. It just feels like, sexual assault. It just feels like the NFL has a lot more of these problems. And it's with star players. It's not just with nobody's on the end of benches. I know it's a 53-man roster, but these are like usually star players. It's kind of interesting, but to me, kind of funny that he got 6 games, which is like a fraction of what Josh Gordon got for smoking weed. So kind of interesting, but that's the Deshaun Watson update there. Hopefully this just kind of goes away. I'm very interested to see how he does with the Browns and how Baker Mayfield now does with the Panthers. I'm kind of rooting for Baker. I hope he does well. He's one of those guys. He's like a Russell Westbrook almost, just got like this ultimate chip on his shoulder. Kind of feels, maybe Russell Westbrook's not a good example, but it feels kind of similar, right? Like where the talent level is there, but maybe sometimes can't get out of his own way type of thing. We'll see how he does, though. Okay, another thing I wanted to touch on today. Sports Illustrated, just the other day on Instagram, posted the 10 most valuable sports franchises in the United States. So you're taking out the Manchester Uniteds and those Premier League teams, stuff like that. So it's just U.S. franchises. And I'm a Washington Commanders, former Washington Redskins fan, big fan. And it's crazy what ownership can do to a team and to a franchise, because the Redskins, which is what they were at the time, they were the second most valued sports. They were actually they were the second most valued NFL franchise and second most valued U.S. franchise for years, behind just the Dallas Cowboys. And Dan Snyder took over, and that lasted for several more years still, but now the last decade, it's just been there slowly dropping lower and lower and lower and lower. And all of it can be directly related back to Dan Snyder taking over and just making mistake after mistake after mistake. There's, speaking of NFL and their issues off the field, there's been all sorts of allegations with the Washington Commanders team and their whole organization with sexual misconduct towards cheerleaders and towards coworkers and, sexual harassment type of stuff from the top down. Lots of issues. There was, of course, the big controversy over the name, the mascot, the Redskins. And so they're the Washington football team, and now they're the Washington Commanders. And it's just been a little bit of a struggle, right? So all of it is ownership related. And they've now plummeted to where they didn't even make this top 10. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 NFL teams ahead of them on this list. I want you to try and guess what those 5 are before I start to announce them. The first one's easy. It's the Dallas Cowboys. What do you think the second team would be? The second NFL team. This is not in any particular order yet, although the Cowboys, I will say, are number 1 in the entire U.S. still. The number 5 team overall is the number 2 NFL team, and it's the Rams, the Los Angeles Rams. Number 6 overall, which is the number 3 NFL team, is the Patriots. Number 7 overall, which is number 4 NFL team, is the Giants. And then number 9 overall, which is the 5th NFL team, is the 49ers. So that's at least 5 teams that are ahead of the Washington Commanders. And interesting, Cowboys, big market. I don't like them. They're my least favorite team, actually. But they are a huge brand. Huge brand. Their ownership isn't very good as far as winning games. Very good as far as promoting, marketing, things like that. The Rams are in a massive market. Smart move. Just won the Super Bowl. Just built a new stadium. Things are on the rise. That makes sense. Patriots, dynasty for decades. Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. Not surprised to see them super high, even though Brady's not been there for a couple of years. Giants, also massive market, not entirely surprising. 49ers, a little bit surprised there because I don't remember seeing them this high in previous lists in years past. But again, they're number 9 overall, number 5 in the NFL. The value, by the way, for the Cowboys is $7.64 billion. Rams, $5.91 billion. Patriots, $5.88 billion. Giants, $5.73 billion. 49ers, $5.18 billion. So big gap of $2.5 billion from the Cowboys to the 49ers, which is number 1 to number 5 within the NFL. The other teams rounding out the top 10, by the way, this one should be easy. It's baseball. I'll give you 2 guesses which team it is, and the first one doesn't count. It's the Yankees. Okay, they're number 2 overall at $7.01 billion. Number 3 overall really surprises me, but not entirely because it is New York. So you've got the Yankees, you've got the Giants, and now who do you have? Of course, the New York Knicks. The Knicks have sucked for so long. What are people doing still cheering for them over there? You've got a team in Brooklyn that's way cooler. Well, actually, Brooklyn's kind of a disaster right now. But maybe if people had gotten behind Brooklyn, I know it's like tradition, it's Madison Square Garden, it's all this stuff, but I'm like, number 3 in the whole country for all sports is the New York Knicks. They have done nothing since Patrick Ewing retired. Nothing. They're completely irrelevant. They're a non-factor in the NBA. So to me, that one was very surprising. They're not a good team. They're not an exciting team. Their logo sucks. I don't get it. Other than they're in the biggest city in America. But there's another team there that has superstars, cooler logo, cooler branding, cooler jerseys, better stadium. Not as iconic, but nicer. I don't know. That one surprised me. Number 4 is also an NBA team, and it won't be surprising. It is the Golden State Warriors. These guys have been on the rise for years. They've got a little dynasty of their own going. 4 titles in 8 years now, is it? They lost one to the Cavs. Then they didn't win when they lost one to the Raptors, and then they watched the Bucks win one, and the Lakers won the bubble one. So that's 4. Yeah, so 4 titles in 8 years for the Warriors. Pretty significant. Obviously, a really big market there too. Smart move getting from Oakland to San Francisco. Maybe lost a handful of fans in Oakland. I doubt it, though. And there's just more money in San Francisco, so I'm imagining that things just are on the up for them. I'm imagining tickets are probably more expensive. Merchandise is more expensive. Value of the land that they own is higher. I would imagine everything has shot up for them since they moved to San Francisco I think it's the Chase Center. And then the Lakers are number 8, not surprising, biggest brand in basketball at $5.63 billion. And then the last team, the only team not mentioned yet, is another baseball team, and it's the Red Sox. Not surprising, Boston Red Sox, $5.07 billion for the Red Sox. Crazy how much sports teams are valued at right now. Crazy. And you think about like buying a team for like a few $100 million, and that sounds like just this outrageous amount that's like way too much. And then years later, it's worth 10x. Like, I would love to own a sports franchise. That would be so much fun. I'd probably be like Jerry Jones and want to be the GM and do everything and end up getting in my own way. But I think it'd be so much freaking fun. It's clearly a great investment. If you can invest in one of these top franchises in one of the major sports. It just keeps going up and up. And I actually think that like the Netflix era, Amazon Prime, Hulu, I actually think it's helping sports, professional sports, because you have like live sports own the cable companies. They own them. Why else do you have cable? I have YouTube TV, which is essentially cable. There's not like an actual cable, but that's what it is. It's cable TV. I have it because of sports. I can get everything else I want on YouTube, on Netflix, on Amazon Prime. I don't need cable. There's no other TV shows I really watch. I do watch Survivor when it's on, but you can watch it like the next day on Hulu for far less. And it's not that big of a deal to be a day late. But sports, you have to watch live. You don't want to just check the box score. You don't want to just check highlights. If it's a big game of any kind, or if it's your favorite team, you're watching that live. It's the last thing in live TV that like people want to pay for. It's worth paying for is sports. Sports are keeping it alive. That's why these franchise values are going up so much. It's crazy. I mean, this is $7.64 billion to Dallas Cowboys. That's a massive corporation at this point. Pretty cool. Okay, last thing I want to touch on. Well, actually, two more. Second to last thing. The Dolphins were found to have tampered with Tom Brady and Sean Payton. So they're losing a 2023 first-round pick and a 2024 third-round pick. So that's actually significant in the NFL. You pick up like franchise-altering players in the draft. Most positions outside of quarterback, nearly every position actually outside of quarterback in the NFL enters the league ready to go. And so to lose a first and a third round pick is pretty significant in the NFL. And I'm like, for tampering? I mean, let's be real. Like, is anyone not tampering? Are there any teams not tampering? Like, sure, the Dolphins reached out to Tom Brady and to Sean Payton before like these legal limits, these legal calendar days set aside where it's allowed. But let's be real. Like, you don't think agents are talking. You don't think friends are talking. Like, there is communication. You don't think the parties themselves are talking. Like, it's happening. And I don't see why it should matter. Like, can you imagine working for a tech company and it's like you're not allowed to interview with another tech company, or you like get fined, or you like lose some sort of privileges like draft picks? It's ludicrous. Like, tampering should not be a thing. Like, there should be no such thing as tampering. If a guy wants to leave, he should be able to leave unless he's under contract, which is what I'm going to get into here in a second. But this whole idea of tampering is pretty dumb. Like, just let these businesses run their business. Let the GM and the president of operations and the coach and the owner, like, let them do their jobs and try and make their team as good as possible. And if that involves talking to other players and other teams about, hey, we want to offer you, a job as soon as this season's up, what's the big deal? I don't get it. I think I think it's stupid. We know it's happening all the time. And so to penalize these guys, it seems silly to me. It seems really, really silly. So, okay, that was the second to last thing. This is the last thing, and that is an update on Kevin Durant and Donovan Mitchell. I don't really have much of an update. There is a dailyknicks.com. Obviously, it's a big blog for the Knicks. Talking all about I just got sidetracked in my mind thinking like this is a pretty good idea for a blog because you've got like 10 million people in that city, and we just went over how they're the most valued NBA franchise there is, one of the most valued in the entire United States for any major sport. And to do a daily post about the Knicks, that's kind of a smart idea because there's going to be people that are going to read it. But anyway, I found this blog, and it basically is talking about how Kevin Durant's trade could help the Knicks get Donovan Mitchell, which of course affects us here in Utah. And it's a bunch of weird roundabout stuff. But the one thing I keep coming across is, they're saying this will have to be, if the Nets trade Kevin Durant, it'll have to be for the biggest haul in NBA history. This whole idea of like a haul, oh, that's a haul. It's like nobody freaking cares if you get 10 random guys, 2 of which are like pretty good role players, and then 8 guys that like are currently on NBA rosters. Like, and 6 draft picks. It's like, no, you lost the trade. The second you're throwing in all of that stuff, actually, no. The second you're throwing in all that stuff, you won the trade. The loser is who gets the quote unquote haul, right? Like, I've played fantasy enough to know, and I know it's not real, but I've played fantasy enough to know that, like, whoever gets the star is winning that trade. Like, the star player, especially if it's a superstar of Kevin Durant's caliber, you're winning that trade. Now, if they could get what they're trying to get from the Celtics of like a Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, another guy, and some draft picks, I would argue that maybe then you could argue that with Durant's age and the fact that he's missed so many games the last 3 seasons, you could argue that the Nets would actually win that trade because Jaylen Brown's young, Marcus Smart is relatively young. They're both bona fide starters. Jaylen Brown's an all-star, Marcus Smart's defensive player of the year. And then another role player plus draft picks. Like, you could argue Kevin Durant at full strength is going to be a more impactful player than all of that combined. He really is. Because there's only 5 guys allowed on the court at a time. And the top guys play 85% of the game minutes. So in the end, the team with the best player frequently comes out on top. That's like a very normal thing. Like, who has the best player? And when it's Kevin Durant, like, you're going to have a chance to win a lot of games. If Kevin Durant went to the Celtics, they'd instantly be favorites to win the East. Instantly. With him sitting on the Nets, in fact, what are the odds? Let's look this up real quick. Because the odds makers are fun to watch because they might have some inside track that we don't know. Changing the betting lines, things like that. So we're going to go to odds, NBA futures, NBA finals. Here we go. So for the 2022-2023 season, look at this. Guess who's number 1? Guess who is favored to win the NBA finals for next year? The Celtics. Because there's talk that they think Durant's going to go there. Vegas is telling you, this is amazing. Vegas is telling you that Durant is going to the Celtics. Warriors are second, then the Bucks, Clippers, Suns, Heat, Lakers, Nets are way down there after the 76ers as well. And that's just because Durant might stay. He might stay there for a year. Crazy. So this is telling us, by the way, the Jazz are about as low as it gets because they lost Gobert. They're probably going to lose Donovan. Not looking good if you're a Jazz fan. I don't like it. I don't like getting a bunch of draft picks. I know there was an argument back. And Alan Malai, who I had on last week, he agreed with the argument that, hey, you can use draft picks for other things. You don't have to use them to draft players. You can use them in an X trade. And I do like that idea. But another thing I keep hearing is how Danny Ainge is this savior. Danny Ainge was in Boston for so freaking long. And what did he do there? He got 1 championship on what I would consider to be the first mega super team of the modern era. The free agency era, our lifetimes, right? When there's 30 teams in the NBA and like somehow one of them gets all this talent. The Celtics did that when they got KG, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, all 3 in their prime. And even Rajon Rondo in his prime. So they had 4 guys in their primes that are Hall of Fame players. And he got a championship. Other than that, like, what did the Celtics do? They signed Kyrie Irving, who is a disaster, and I would never want him on my team. They stole Gordon Hayward from the Jazz. That didn't work out super well. Like, they've not won anything. They went to a finals, but they didn't win it. And they have huge advantages in being the Boston Celtics. They're the most storied team in NBA history, right there with the Lakers, maybe slightly behind the Lakers, actually. They're one of the most popular. They're in a huge market that's appealing to a lot of players. There's just so much history and lore there in Boston, with the Boston Celtics. Like, they're the freaking Celtics. And he got 1 championship. So I just don't know that I look at Danny Ainge the same way everybody else does. I don't care that he went and got a bunch of draft picks from the Timberwolves. Like, the Jazz are going to suck next year. Like, the Jazz are going to be really bad next year, especially if we lose Donovan Mitchell for more draft picks and players that, like, are average. Like, Patrick Beverley, like, those types of players, they're not moving the needle. Like, they're not making you a championship team. Like, they can be a decent piece on a championship team, but they're also very replaceable. Like, it's just not that big of a deal. And draft picks are even more so that way. So that's my take on that. Interesting, though. Celtics favored to win the NBA Finals as of right now, which tells you they think Kevin Durant's going there. All right, that's all the time I have for today, you guys. Please hit that subscribe button. Please check out Tripio. I'll see you next time. I am out. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out STBSportsTake.com. Simply the best in sports.
'Cause we are warriors.